Three soldiers stood in stunned disbelief, their weapons lowered as a fully grown brown bear crashed through the security fence. Instead of attacking or fleeing, the massive creature ran straight toward the commander's office and did something no wild animal had ever done before. It bowed its head and waited. When they discovered why this 800-pound predator had risked death to seek human help, even the toughest military men could not hold back their tears. Lieutenant Scott Parker had seen his fair share of strange events during his 15 years in the military, but nothing in his experience could explain what was unfolding at Outpost 23, a remote base deep in Alaska's unforgiving wilderness. Their facility had handled everything from brutal blizzards to unauthorized aircraft, but a bear deliberately breaching their defenses only to show submission was beyond anything they had ever encountered. Outpost 23 was one of America's most secure installations in the region. It was fortified with motion sensors, electric fencing, and round-the-clock armed patrols. Its primary mission was to monitor a vast expanse of wilderness bordering sensitive territories. With 15 highly trained soldiers and state-of-the-art surveillance equipment, they prided themselves on detecting any threat long before it reached their perimeter. Yet on this freezing morning, all their advanced security measures meant nothing against the desperation of one mother bear. The base's alarms had barely finished sounding when she appeared, not with aggression or fear, but with an urgent purpose. What unfolded over the next 72 hours would not only challenge everything these hardened soldiers believed about wild animals, but also lead to a discovery that would shake the entire military command. Lieutenant Parker was about to learn that sometimes the greatest acts of courage come from the most unexpected sources. Lieutenant Parker's first instinct was to follow standard military protocol, neutralize any threat that breached their security. But something about the bear's behavior made him hesitate. She was not charging or displaying aggression. Instead, she remained in a submissive posture, occasionally lifting her head to make soft, almost pleading sounds that echoed through the silent compound. The base's wildlife expert, Sergeant James Miller, quickly pointed out how extraordinary this behavior was. Brown bears were known for their aggressive, territorial nature, especially when cornered. They never willingly approached human settlements unless searching for food, and they certainly never exhibited submissive behavior toward humans. Yet this bear was breaking every known rule of wild animal behavior. As the morning progressed, more unusual details emerged. The bear's thick fur was matted with ice and snow, suggesting she had traveled a great distance. Her paw prints in the snow showed that she had circled the base multiple times before making her desperate entry. Most strikingly, despite being surrounded by armed soldiers, she displayed no signs of fear. Instead, her eyes held an intelligence and urgency that unsettled even the most experienced men. Lieutenant Parker ordered his team to maintain their positions but hold their fire. He had faced many dangerous situations, but this one required a different kind of approach. The bear's actions suggested this was not a random encounter. There had to be a reason for such extraordinary behavior. Security camera footage from the previous night revealed an even more puzzling detail. The bear had been watching the base for hours, carefully studying the patrol patterns and movement of personnel. This level of calculated behavior was unprecedented. It was as if she had planned her approach, waiting for the perfect moment to make her dramatic entrance. Then Sergeant Miller noticed something else. The bear was a nursing mother. However, no cubs were visible in any of the security footage. If she had left her young behind to seek human help, something serious must have happened. Thermal imaging from the base's perimeter cameras provided another piece of the puzzle. The bear's body temperature indicated exhaustion, suggesting she had been traveling for many hours without rest. Her tracks stretched far into the wilderness, following a winding path that seemed to have a specific destination. As the hours passed, the bear's urgency only increased. She would occasionally rise, take a few steps toward the forest, then return to her submissive posture, making the same pleading sounds. It was as if she was trying to communicate, trying to get them to follow her. The base's communication officer reported the incident to Regional Command, but the response they received only deepened the mystery. No other military installation or civilian settlement in the area had ever reported anything similar. This was entirely uncharted territory. Lieutenant Parker faced a difficult decision. Military protocol strictly prohibited unauthorized missions outside the base, especially to follow a wild animal. But his instincts told him that sometimes the most important choices were not found in any manual. After 6 hours of observing the bear, Parker called an emergency meeting with his senior staff. The discussion was intense. Some argued that leaving the base's security was too risky for what could be a wild goose chase. Others believed they had a moral obligation to investigate, especially if cubs were involved. The debate continued until Sergeant Miller pointed out a crucial detail. The bear was showing signs of physical distress, and her urgency was increasing. Parker made his decision. He would lead a small rescue team to follow the bear. Parker selected 4 of his most experienced soldiers, including Sergeant Miller for his wildlife expertise. They equipped themselves with medical supplies, emergency rations, tranquilizer guns, and survival gear. No one knew what they might encounter, but they had to be prepared for anything. As they prepared to leave, the bear's behavior changed dramatically. She became animated, as if sensing their decision. Her distressed sounds turned to soft huffs, and she moved toward the tree line, constantly looking back to ensure they were following. Tracking her was treacherous. A winter storm had intensified, reducing visibility. The terrain was rugged, with dense forests, steep inclines, and unstable ice formations. Darkness was also approaching fast, adding another layer of danger. Parker knew they were racing against time. Remarkably, the bear seemed to understand their challenges. She moved at a pace that allowed them to follow, occasionally stopping to check if they were still behind her. Her behavior continued to astound them. This was no mindless animal. She was leading them with purpose. After nearly 2 hours of tracking, the team reached a clearing. The bear's behavior suddenly became more agitated. She quickened her pace, her powerful muscles tensed with anticipation. The team braced themselves. Whatever had driven this wild animal to seek human help, they were about to find out. What they discovered would haunt them for years. Trapped at the bottom of an abandoned mining shaft were 2 bear cubs, barely moving in the freezing temperatures. The shaft, a relic from Alaska's gold rush era, had partially collapsed, creating a deadly trap. The cubs had fallen nearly 15 feet into the frozen pit, the walls too steep and smooth for them to climb out. Their mother had tried everything. Her paw prints and claw marks surrounded the opening, evidence of her desperate attempts to dig them free. Sergeant Miller quickly assessed the cubs' condition. They were severely dehydrated and hypothermic. The smaller one was barely breathing. The situation was critical. The soldiers wasted no time in beginning the rescue operation, setting up ropes and harnesses. But the mining shaft was unstable. Any wrong move could collapse the walls entirely. They had to work with surgical precision. What followed was a tense, delicate operation. The first cub, though weak, was responsive and successfully lifted to safety. But the second cub was unresponsive, its tiny body dangerously cold. Sergeant Miller volunteered to be lowered into the shaft, risking his own life to retrieve it. Just as he reached the cub, the walls began to cave in. The team pulled him up as fast as possible, debris falling around them. With seconds to spare, Miller emerged, clutching the lifeless cub. The team immediately worked to revive it, using emergency medical supplies to warm its body and stabilize its breathing. The mother bear, astonishingly, remained calm, watching their every move with an understanding that defied logic. By morning, both cubs were stable. After 3 days of care, they were strong enough to leave. As the mother bear prepared to lead them back into the wild, she turned to Parker, held his gaze, and let out a soft huff, perhaps a final thank you, before disappearing into the forest. From that day on, the soldiers at Outpost 23 were never the same.